Hello everyone, I'm Sebastian Y, and this is Foundations of Economics. In this video, we're going to talk about the price elasticity of supply. The price elasticity of supply is essentially the seller-side version of the price elasticity of demand. It's defined very similarly. We just have the percent change in the quantity supplied divided by the percent change in the price. We know from the law of supply that when the price goes up, the quantity supplied goes up, and when the price goes down, the quantity supplied also goes down. So when the price change is positive, the quantity change is also positive. When the price change is negative, the quantity change is also negative, which means the price elasticity of supply is always positive. Much like the own price elasticity of demand is always negative. Much like demand, we can also talk about elasticities that are greater than 1. We can say that that is elastic supply. The most elastic supply possible has an elasticity of infinity. On the graph, that's going to be a horizontal supply curve. If the price elasticity of supply is less than 1, we say that supply is inelastic. It is relatively unresponsive to changes in the price. The lowest possible elasticity is again 0. When that happens, we have a vertical supply curve. An example of a perfectly inelastic supply curve would be something like sports or concert tickets, where no matter what the price is, the supply remains exactly the same. There is a fixed number of seats in the venue. Finally, we can also have the case where the price elasticity of supply is exactly 1, where it is unit elastic. This means the percent change in price is exactly equal to the percent change in quantity. Let's think about a few factors that influence the price elasticity of supply. The price elasticity of supply depends very much on what the good is and what the production process is for that good. For example, if our good is rentable land, generally that's pretty inelastic. There's only so much land available, and it's pretty much impossible to make new land. That's going to be quite inelastic. On the other hand, consumer goods tend to have a more elastic supply because if the price goes up, it's easier to produce more. This does depend on a few factors, though. If a producer is currently producing under capacity, its supply is going to be quite elastic. If they're under capacity, it's very easy to ramp up production if the price goes up. On the other hand, a producer who is near or at its full capacity of production is going to have a relatively inelastic supply because it's more difficult to respond to a price change, because there's not as much they can do to increase their quantity supplied. Going along with this, the time horizon is really important here. In the short run, much like demand, supply tends to be more inelastic, especially for those producers who are at capacity. In the short run, it's very difficult to increase capacity, but in the long run, they might be able to do that. So in the long run, supply becomes more elastic. Let's dig a little bit deeper into calculating the price elasticity of supply. Just like with the own price elasticity of demand, we can use the definition of a percent change in a variable, which is the change in the variable divided by the current level. Plugging these in, percent change in quantity supplied becomes the change in quantity supplied of good X divided by the quantity of good X, all that divided by the change in the price of X over the price of X. We will again use the rules for dividing by fractions and rewrite this as the top fraction times the reciprocal of the bottom fraction, and then use the commutative property of multiplication to just rearrange our equation. I'm going to write the change in the quantity supplied divided by the change in the price times the price divided by the quantity. This looks very similar to our definition of the own price elasticity of demand, except we've got an S there instead of a D for supply. Just like before, this is the slope of the supply function, and then we have the ratio of price to quantity. Let's go back to our example supply function that we've been using. Qs equals -10 plus 5p. The slope of this thing is 5, so we can plug that right in. But then we need to know what is the price and the quantity. Let's just suppose, for example, that our price is 4. When the price is 4, we can just plug that in to figure out the quantity supplied. We have 5 times 4, which is 20. 20 minus 10 is 10. Putting this into our formula, our elasticity is slope of 5 times price over quantity. That's 20 divided by 10, which is 2. Since this is bigger than 1, we say that this is elastic. Mathematically, it means that if the price goes up by 1%, the quantity supplied will go up by 2%. With the linear supply curves we're going to be dealing with, the slope is going to remain the same, but the ratio of px to qxs might change. In the graph here, I have calculated the price elasticity of supply at several different points along our example supply curve. The one that we just did was the price of 4 and quantity of 10, where you can see the elasticity is 2. As we move along this particular supply curve, up and to the right, the slope remains 5 the entire way, but the ratio of price to quantity is shrinking as we move outward. That lowers the elasticity. Just like with demand, even though the slope is constant, the elasticity can change as we move from point to point along the curve. In the next video, we are going to wrap up elasticity with a few applications.